Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Viv. I make videos about witchcraft, paganism, the occult, spirituality, and other related topics, so if that sounds like something interesting to you, feel free to subscribe. Today we are going to be talking about my experiences working with the god Cernunnos. Now, my last video was an informational video about him, his history, depictions of him, and worship of him in the modern day, and kind of general practical information. So if you haven't seen that, if you'd like to learn more about him in that sense, I'll put it up here, and I definitely recommend you go watch it either before this one or after this video. It's really up to you if that is something that you find interesting and that you'd like to check out. But this video is much more personal and is about my personal connection with Cernunnos, my personal history with him, and my experiences with this god. So my very first experience with Cernunnos was when I was around 12 or 13. Growing up, I was raised both Christian and Muslim in alternating ways. And not because one parent was Christian, one was Muslim. It was much more complicated than that, actually. My mom was Muslim and my dad was an atheist at the time. But my mom and I ended up moving somewhere where there wasn't a mosque or really any Muslims. The only place of worship or religious kind of area was a church. And so we ended up going there, and that was my exposure to Christianity. So fast forward, I was 12 or 13, and the Abrahamic religions, especially Christianity, really weren't resonating with me. I didn't feel like it was the right path for me. I felt kind of afraid of hell because of these thoughts I was having. And I ended up having this dream. And in the dream, I am kind of walking through a forest, and I come across this meadow. And in this meadow, everything is sunlight, everything is beautiful, everything is divine, it feels like. And I come across this man, and he's wearing white, and he has a beard, and he kind of looks at me, and I feel a sense of peace, a very, very strong, innate sense of peace. And the first dream, I just saw this man, and I woke up. And then it became a recurring dream where it happened over and over again. And then the last few times I saw the dream, he turned into a stag, and he turned around and he ran into the forest, but it kind of felt like he was beckoning me to follow him. But as soon as he turned into a stag and ran into the forest, I would wake up. And I had no idea what this meant, but this dream really stuck in my brain, especially since, as of where I am in my life right now, I tend not to have super intense dreams. I don't usually remember my dreams, if I'm completely honest, although I wish I was better at that. I'm just terrible at keeping a dream journal, and that's something for me to work on. So I can count the number of dreams that I remember, like, on one hand. And this is the dream that I remember above all others. And at the time, I was very young. I didn't really know what it meant, and I kept thinking about it. I was mulling over it, and I was doing some research online, or kind of just surfing the web, I guess. And I ended up coming across a page about Wicca and witchcraft, and I found out about the horned god and the goddess. And immediately I thought about my dream, and I thought, is that the horned god? Because he turns into a stag. It felt like a very godly, divine energy. And all of a sudden, everything clicks into place. Now, fast forward to a few years later, and I see him as Cernunnos rather than the general horned god. But he was still always the same god. I was just calling him something different from what I call him now. After that, I looked more and more into witchcraft and magic, and I started off Wiccan, as many of us did, I think, at that age. And I felt so much joy. And at the time, we lived in Alaska, and I've talked about this when I've been brought onto a couple of interviews before, but if you haven't seen those, you won't know this about me, but if you've seen those, you know. Alaska, to me, was the perfect place to explore this and discover this part of myself and to discover this new way of looking at the world. And it was so beautiful. I would go into the woods and I would just feel so connected and so happy, and it kind of brought back my whimsy. And I hadn't really lost my whimsy, but I think it was starting to slip away because of my fears and my thoughts around religion and just society in general. I think when you start to become a teenager, that whimsy is kind of stripped away from you. And it really brought it back, because growing up, when I was a young child, I loved fairies. I was obsessed with fairies. I used to build fairy houses. I saw a fairy once, and that's a whole other story. I had books about fairies. I wholeheartedly believed in fairies, and it was just something that I did as a kid. It was something that felt right. And it kind of brought back that same feeling that I had had when I was a younger child in my grandparents' garden, mixing together leaves and twigs and petals to make potions. And I started doing that again. And I really felt like that dream of Cernunnos brought me into that, and it brought me onto that path, and it made me really feel aligned, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. So fast forward to my teenage years, and around 14 years old, my spirituality kind of fell off for a few months, but then I kind of really came back to it strongly. And by around 15 or 16, it was a daily routine, huge part of my life, kind of informed my life in general in a major way, just like it does today. Now, my relationship with Cernunnos is still there. I leave out an offering of water for him every morning. Whenever I'm in the woods or at a sacred site or anywhere out in nature, especially if it's kind of wild or an old growth forest or really kind of primal and deep, I really feel his presence there. And I often see him in meditation, whether I'm seeking him out or not. Sometimes I seek him out in meditations. Sometimes I'll go into meditation, not really expecting it, and then he'll show up. And the way that it works is that I'll kind of see it in my mind's eye as I'm meditating. Very often I'll come across him sitting cross-legged on the forest floor. And sometimes he'll get up. Sometimes he'll lead me somewhere. There was a time recently where he led me to the edge of a cliff. And thinking about it later, I realized it was very similar to the Fool card in the tarot. And the Fool is often representative of the beginning of a cycle of new beginnings, and it can also be representative of youth, being naive, and perhaps not having all the knowledge yet, but you're going out there and you're stepping over that cliff and you're moving forward, and you've got a whole journey, a whole path ahead of you. And I thought that was a very beautiful message. So I do see him in meditation a lot. I wouldn't say I do a whole lot of structured rituals with him. I'd say it's mostly offerings, connection to nature, and meditation. And about a year ago, I got my very first tattoo, and that tattoo is in honor of Cernunnos, and it depicts a pair of antlers wrapped in vines and verbena flowers. And verbena flowers are associated with Cernunnos, and of course the vines, the antlers, that all kind of makes sense, right? So I think that Cernunnos, along with Hecate, is one of the most influential deities in my practice and on me as a person. And he features very heavily in my practice. But he is and always will be the being that brought me onto this path, and the being that brought me out of that kind of spiritual rut that I was feeling, because I didn't realize that this was an option until I saw those dreams and until I started researching Wicca and witchcraft on the internet, and then eventually buying my first books about it and really feeling connected to nature and the fairy realm and the spirit realms in general. I think that Cernunnos brings a lot of feelings and qualities and just general things to me, including wisdom, prosperity, and peace, and a connection to nature and a feeling of being grounded, but also a feeling of being spiritual and kind of connected to the other side, as well as being connected to the earth and to what's immediately around me. He's very animistic, and I'd also say he's very liminal. So he's both here and there. He's both earthly and otherworldly. He's both human-esque and animalistic. He is both peaceful, but he also, to me, has a warlike attribute as well, and this attribute of being both lord of the animals, but also the hunter. And so there are many dualities, but he is always in the middle, and he's kind of this liminal being in this liminal space, and maybe that's part of the reason why his image and his archetype has been so ubiquitous in witchcraft, because witchcraft so often deals with the liminal and that which is in between, the threshold. And that's where magic really happens. And so I've definitely experienced that aspect of him as well. And that's another really beautiful thing. And of course, the kind of masculine, the gentle, strong, dependable kind of masculine element that I think is really beautiful. That is all for today. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and for those of you who worship or work with Cernunnos, whatever term you prefer, let me know if this resonated with you, if you felt any of the same things that I did, or if you've had a recurring dream where Cernunnos called to you. Please let me know in the comments, or if this has sparked your interest in perhaps looking into him more, perhaps working or worshiping with him. My links to my Patreon and my Instagram and all of that good stuff are down below. And I also have a Ko-Fi if you don't want to subscribe to anything. So definitely check that out if you would like. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful rest of your week, and that you're all having a lovely start to your year. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Love you all. Blessed be.